Hello, this is Mitch from Buck's Vintage Baseball Cards. And in today's video, I thought we could take a look at the T206 collection and the various backs that are available in the set. By way of background, my dad collected these cards in the 80s, and he was able to assemble about 460 of the 524 fronts. When I got the binder that he pulled together, I started flipping through and noticed that most of these backs are either Piedmont or Sweet Caporal. So the cards were distributed by the American Tobacco Company in 1909 through 1911 in cigarette packs and pouches of tobacco, depicting players from the time, from minor leagues, major leagues. And on the back, there's basically an advertisement for one of the cigarette brands. This happens to be Piedmont. In addition to the brands, of which there are 16, there were 3 series of cards, 3 waves of cards that came out, which are noted on some of the backs. So for example, here's the 350. There's also a 150 and a 460. So there's 3 different waves. In addition to that, there are also several factories that produce the cards, and they printed the factory number on the bottom. Here's an example of Factory 25. So let's take a look at these backs, and I'll also talk about the scarcity of the back based on the PSA research that they did by David Hall back in 2015. And Scott Reeder, who they looked at all the backs that they had observed and came up with some stats on that. So the most common back that you'll find is the Piedmont back, followed by Sweet Caporal. So let's take a look at Piedmont. So I already showed you the 350, and there's also there's the 150 here. You can see here's a 150 Factory 25. And so here's an example of the Piedmont 460. So this was the 3rd series. And you can see the factory number 25 here on the bottom. And then the 4th of the Piedmont is actually pretty rare. And this is the Piedmont 350 460 Factory 42. And you can see the 42 here. That's a North Carolina plant. So kind of a sneaky rare Piedmont of the 4 different varieties. So now we move on to Sweet Caporal. This is the 2nd most common brand, and there are actually 9 different versions of Sweet Caporal. So let's start off with a 150 subjects Factory 25, and you have 150 subjects Factory 30, if you can see that. And you know the difference between the 25 and the 25 is Virginia and 30 is New York, basically. These factories, it would be great to figure out where exactly were these factories. So there's also a Sweet Caporal 150 Factory 649 overprint. You can see the line there. They call that an overprint, and that shows a different factory. So that's 3. So next there are actually 2 different 350 subjects. There is a Factory 30 and good old Factory 25. Hard to see the factory number, but they are different. So there's 3. Those are the 350 series. And finally, in the 460 series, they actually had 4 different versions of that. So the first one is Factory 25, and that's right here. Second is Factory 30 in that final series. They did have a factory 42, North Carolina. So there's the factory 42. And then they had the good old overprint as well, factory 42. So clearly Sweet Capital, the highest amount of backs that you can get. That's nine backs in total. So of Sweet Cap and Piedmont, that's going to make up about 75% of all known T206 cards. So if you're flipping through your collection, you're going to basically have Piedmonts and Sweet Cap. So let's take a look at the better backs, what PSA calls the better backs, next up. So the so-called better backs are comprised of 3 different brands, and let's start it off with Sovereign. So Sovereign, here's the Sovereign back. Sovereign is available in the 150, and this is a 350, and also the 460. So let's take a look at these. So there's the 350, and here's the 460. Also you have 150. Here's the 150. So 3 different waves of Sovereign. And in addition to that, the 350 was actually printed in 2 types of ink. So I'm adding that as a back. So there's really 4 different styles of back. So here's 350 in what they call the forest green Sovereign Cigarettes Fit for a King baseball series. And here's I don't know if you can tell the difference on the video there. This is the what they call apple green. Hard to tell, but it is a different ink color. So those are the 4 Sovereigns. So if you're counting along at home, we've covered 17 different varieties of backs so far. And the other 2 varieties, brands in the better backs category are Old Mill and Polar Bear. And I like both of these. It's pretty cool. So here are the 2 versions of Old Mill. Old Mill is the only back. You can only find this particular Old Mill back in the Southern League. So there's a Southern League comprised of 48 cards, and only Old Mill, Hindu, and Piedmont produced cards for the Southern League. So here's the Old Mill baseball series. They say Texas, South Atlantic, Virginia, and Southern Leagues. And then you also have the Old Mill baseball series large assortment. They've also discovered these are black ink. So there is also a brown ink, extremely rare, which I don't have, Old Mill in brown ink. And there's also an Old Mill Southern League that has an overprint. And according to PSA, there's only 1 known example of that. So I'm not sure that's really they claim they say it's a back variety, but it could be maybe it was an error, but there's only 1, and it's a Greminger card. So those are the 2 Old Mill, and here's one of my favorites is Polar Bear. And this is obviously, to date, you can see that this looks a lot different. This is a nice example of Polar Bear. It's like a dark blue, almost black back. It was distributed in scrap tobacco bags. So a lot of the examples are have a lot of tobacco stains on them, actually. That's a nice example of the Polar Bear. So those are what they call the better backs. Now let's get into the scarce backs. So now we'll take a look at the 5 brands within the scarce back category. Each of these brands represents about 1 to 1.5% of all known T206 backs. So 1 out of 100. So that's pretty rare, actually. So let's start off with the American Beauty. American Beauty has 3 different versions. So here's Clyde Engel, and I don't know if you can tell, it's pretty thin. This particular brand the cigarette box was thinner than normal, so they actually cut it thin. And you can see this is a American Beauty. It has green ink, and it has a nice frame. And this is 350 subjects with the frame. There's also a version of almost the same card, but for some reason there's no frame here. So that's another variety of the American Beauty back. And in addition to that, they did also issue cards in the 460 series with no frame. And this one I didn't actually tried to get graded, but they bounced it back because I think there was a little bit of card loss there. But that's the American Beauty 460. So the next brand that I'll show you is the Cycle brand. Now Cycle distributed cards in the 350 and 460 series. So here's the 350 Cycle. This is Hallman, a minor leaguer, and Cycle 350. And here's Kleinau, which is actually in an SGC slab in the Cycle 460 series. So there's two versions of Cycle. So next up is a really fun brand. The collectors abbreviate as EPDG. It's actually El Príncipe de Gales, which actually means Prince of Wales, and has a red ink. And this is one of what they call the baseball series. It doesn't even show the series name on the back. I really like the EPGG. Pretty cool back there. And next we have Tolstoy. Tolstoy, Russian mouthpiece. This is a black ink, assorted subjects. It doesn't have the series designation, but they actually issued this in the same time that they issued the 350 series. And last up in this group is Hindu. Hindu is one that I didn't have in my original collection, and I had to pick one up. This is a Hindu brown, and there is also a Hindu red, which I don't have. So there's two different color variations of Hindu. And again, Hindu is one of the three brands that you can find with the Southern League. This happens to be a Major League Bill Bradley from Cleveland. So that's the Hindu. The next two brands are what they call rare backs and have less than 1% population in total. Here's an example of a broadleaf 350 and a Carolina Bright. The Carolina Bright is Philippi and Deacon Philippi of Pittsburgh. And this is what the back looks like. Has like a nice frame to it. It doesn't say 350 or 460. It just says large assortment, baseball subjects. Carolina Bright, very difficult to find. Very tough to acquire. And this is the broadleaf. And here's Mike Mitchell from Cincinnati. And when I took a look at what my dad had collected in his binder of about 460 cards, he had one broadleaf, which I actually traded for a few other cards that I was trying to build. I am trying to build all of the fronts. And then I went out and acquired this broadleaf just to have one. So I have one broadleaf. That's a 350. There's also a broadleaf 460 that's one of the rarest of all T206 backs. And I'm probably not going to ever get one of those. So these are the two, what they call rare backs. So the last group of cards I'll show you is from a category they call extremely rare, which is each of them is about less than 0.1% of all backs. So tough to find these. And the first one is Lennox. I really like that Lennox back. This one's a good example. You can see the black ink. There's no frame. It doesn't say 350 or 460. It just basically says large assortment baseball series. So that's the Lennox. Now this is a black ink version. There's also, they discovered a brown ink as well version. In fact, they just saw, there was just a Ty Cobb bat off shoulder that they found a brown Lennox. Unbelievable find. And then finally, I just picked up this Ooze It. It's a little rough in the back, but these are really hard to find, these Ooze Its. So I just wanted to add one to my collection, even though the back was a little rough. Super happy to have an Ooze It in the set. I also wanted to show one other type of card that maybe doesn't get attention anymore, and let me show you that. I'll take these away here. So here's Perry Lipe in the old mill, and you can see the back. And here's a version that they call a blank back, and the blank back, there's a history behind it. It's basically, they probably ran a sheet and for some reason did not print a back on it. Someone from the factory took it home and just took scissors and cut out these backs, or cut these cards, and they made their way into circulation in the 70s. Someone came into a show and brought them all in, and I think at some point PSA, SGC, they decided that they will not grade the blank backs because they're not considered official cards. They were never issued officially, but you can really tell that this is authentic based on just, looking at it, comparing it to an authentic card. And also the surface is actually very smooth. It's not like someone peeled off the back. It's you can tell it just was never printed. Nothing was printed on it. So I'm proud to have one of those. I'm not going to get it graded because they won't do that. But that really concludes my video. The cards that I don't have and probably will never have are drum. Drum is extremely rare and difficult to find, and also some of those color variations, as well as the Ty Cobb back, of which there's probably less than 20 known. Only has Ty Cobb on the front, and so I'm pretty much, unless I can get a drum, I think I'm pretty much done collecting backs. Thanks for watching. Take care.